Alrighty, so congruent triangles. Now, does anybody know what congruent means? Yes?
Basically, like the same.
Yeah, basically the same. Actually, does anyone here have identical twin siblings? Anyone here have identical twin? You have cousin, identical twins? Yeah? No? Do you know there's, I think, three sets of students here are identical twins in the school. See if you can find them. There's three of them. But congruent basically just means exactly the same. Okay, so if you want to write a definition for that.
It's on the next slide.
Thank you. Right, so congruent just basically means exactly the same. Now we're going to limit this to just triangles for this year, okay? But in the next years that you work on geometry, we'll be working with other shapes. But for now, congruent triangles is what we're working with. Now, a couple of things you need to know, okay, is that you need to understand lengths of triangles and angles of triangles, which we've kind of been learning about so far. Yeah, so you know that most triangles, where are they? Triangles will always equal up to 180 degrees. Okay, and you've got basically three different types. So scalene, none of them are the same. Isosceles, two are the same, and then you've got your equilateral triangles. Okay, those are mainly the ones that you'll be working with these questions for congruent triangles. Okay, so the intention for today is to be able to understand how to match, okay, your corresponding sides of the triangle. So what's that saying is looking at one side of a triangle and matching it with another side of a congruent triangle. Okay. You need to know how to prove as well why triangles are the same. Okay, and be able to prove that using one of the tests. The keyword there is that tests, meaning there's going to be multiple tests to prove why something is congruent. And then hopefully by the end of today's lesson, you'll be able to do this. Okay, determine the side lengths of different shapes and whether they're congruent or not. Okay. Right, so when shapes are exactly the same, obviously we call them congruent, okay? Triangles generally are labeled on their corners, okay, when you do these questions. So the corners are labeled. So you've got to make sure when you do these sort of questions, you've got to name or call the triangles based on their labels. Okay, for example, this triangle, we're going to call it ABC. This triangle is called DEF. And this green one is called GHI. And according to this statement, triangle ABC is congruent to triangle DEF. Okay? And when you write down a statement, okay, you've got to make sure that you use these appropriate labeling symbols. So as a final answer, when you want to state that something is congruent, you'd write this. Triangle ABC is congruent with triangle DEF. Now you see the equal sign is a squiggle on top of it. You've got to make sure you include that, okay, as a way to prove whether something is congruent or not, okay? And then for, if a triangle is not congruent, you can just write triangle ABC is not congruent to triangle GHI. What you can do is triangle ABC equal sign with a squiggle, but then you put a dash because it means it's not. Okay, congruent with triangle DEF. So that works as a way of proving if it's not, sorry, GHI, wrong one. GHI. As a way of proving with reason why it's not, as it's not congruent. Okay? So just understand the little conventions that we use, okay? When you're referring to the triangle, draw a little shape of a triangle, okay? If you're referring to an angle, which we'll look at later, it should look like this. Okay, but we'll look into more of that a little bit later. Okay, but just understand the conventions of how we prove or show that something is congruent or not, and mainly that equal sign with a squiggle. Okay. Alright, so just to let's formalize the different types of tests that we do to prove congruency. Okay, you'll find that there's 4 tests that you normally have to use to prove whether something is going to be congruent or not congruent. Right, 4 tests. Okay, and generally they're not that hard to identify. Once you actually just look at the shape, you can already see what test you can use. Okay, first test here is called SSS. Let's write that here. SSS, that test. What that means is all sides of the triangle are exactly the same. Okay, every single side of the triangle is exactly the same. Okay, so if all the sides are the same, all the sides are the same here as well, as in not that they're equilateral, but that this side and that side are the same, this side and that side are the same, that side and that side are the same, that means they're going to be congruent. Okay, so that's test number 1. Test number 2, okay, is when 2 angles are the same and one side. So it's called AAS. So on your triangle, if you find that 2 angles, so this angle and that angle, this angle, that angle, and one side, so it doesn't matter which side, but at least one of the sides are the same, it is going to be AAS as a test. Okay, and I'll show you guys how we use these to justify what the congruency is. Yes, after this. Yeah, just all right. All right. Third test, okay, is this one. SAS. Okay, so what do you guys think that means? Side, angle, side. So 2 sides and 1 angle. So when you find that there's 2 sides, 2, and then 1 angle, that's the same in those 2 triangles, and they are congruent. Okay, and the last one is called RHS. So I'll just write here. Okay, RHS. Okay, so with this test here, always use this test if you see a right angle. Okay, always. Whenever you see a right angle, automatically think, okay, this is going to be using RHS to prove that it's congruent. So in this case, it's a right angle. So if they have to have a right angle. The hypotenuse, remember, hypotenuse is the longest side of your triangle. So if the hypotenuse is the same, as well as another side, then they're going to be congruent. Okay?
And the hypotenuse is always opposite the right angle.
Yes, correct. All right, hypotenuse is always opposite the right angle. Okay, so I'm going to write your 4 tests here. Test number 1 is SSS, so all 3 sides. Test number 2 is AAS, so 2 angles, 1 side. Test number 3 is SAS, 2 sides and an angle, or side, angle, side, and then the 4th test is RHS. Okay, and these are, which is right angle, hypotenuse, and side. So these are the 4 tests that we're going to use to prove if something or a triangle is exactly the same. Okay, shapes can also actually, before we do that, I'm going to, let's do some of those as an example. All right, let me draw a triangle here. Okay, so as an example of how we can prove they're congruent, so let's say that this is 60. This is 60. This can be 3, 3, 2, 12. Okay, so as a test for this, okay, this is what you'll do when you do these, when you actually have to prove if something is congruent, okay? I'm going to call this triangle, and remember they all have to have labels and names, so this can be A, B, C, and this can be D, E, and F. Alright, can anyone tell me what's one thing we can point out that's the same in these 2 triangles?
The angle.
The angle, okay, so let's start with the angle. So in terms of writing the angle, I would write it like this. So let's start with this triangle. Angle BAC. Notice how the angle I'm focusing on is the one in the middle, BAC. BAC, because it's BAC, so it's this angle here. Okay, so you've got to make sure when you're referring to an angle, angle BAC is the same as, so what would this angle be? D, oh well, yes, D, but what's the proper way of calling it?
EDF.
EDF, so angle DDF. Okay, are the same, they're equal, and you would write angle, or just the letter A. Okay, because they're the same.
Don't you do the curvy line on top?
Not yet, not until the very end. Okay. Okay, what's next? What else is the same here?
The side
Yep, the side, which side do you want to refer to?
AC and UF.
Okay, so for the side AC, we're going to use this convention. AC, and you're going to put a line on top when you refer to the side. So line or side AC is equal to, which side are we look? What's it the same as?
Yeah.
DF, so side DF. And then in brackets, you'd call that side. Okay? And then what's the last thing that's the same?
Side BC.
Side BC.
Yeah.
Good, so you go side BC is equal to side EF. And that's also side. So as a test, okay, you can see that you've fulfilled 3 of them. You've got ASS or SAS. Okay, so what you'd write as a final answer is what Lily was mentioning before. Triangle ABC is congruent with a triangle DEF because, and you'd use the test that you used, which was in this case 2 sides and an angle, SAS. Okay, so that's what you'd write as an answer. Alright, so you have to prove it by showing what are 3 things in that triangle that are the same, on those pairs of triangles that are the same, and then you write down your final statement. So triangle ABC is congruent with DEF, and because of the test that you use, SAS. Okay? Hoping that you guys, I don't know if there's room there in your page for this. Unfortunately, they didn't write that many examples for these questions. So, sorry for that. I should have maybe written or put in another slide for you guys. All right. Can I move on?
No.
Okay. All right. So these basically are going to be congruent, and you need to provide a reason why. Okay. And this is how you go about the process of telling me the reasons. Alright, I'm going to go next slide. Okay, come on, quick. Okay, and obviously, depending on the triangle, I'm just going to draw a quick example here, without even, I guess, you telling me. Okay, what test do you think we'll use for this one?
RHS.
Good, RHS, because there's a right angle. Okay, but then you've got to go through the process of doing all this, okay, to prove that. Okay, now I'm going to move on to the next part.
Okay.
This lets me. Okay, so transformed shapes. Sometimes they're going to try and throw you off by presenting the triangles in different ways. So they're not always going to show them like this. Sometimes what they'll do, you get a question where it's ABC, but then the triangle DEF could be like flipped over. Or it could be, reflected, not flipped. It could be rotated, so they might turn the shape, or they might translate it, which just means they moved it. Okay, so just keep that in mind, even though the shape might not look exactly the same because they've either rotated it, they've flipped it, or they've translated it. Okay, it doesn't mean that they're not congruent. You just need to properly look at the shape and understand what they've done to it. Okay, I'll do an example of that here. Let's do this one. Okay, actually this one's really easy, but let's do it anyway. Alright, so what's the same in this triangle?
Angle.
Angle, okay, so let's start with that. So angle, let's go to this page by the way, if you're not here already. Let's start with that. Angle, Okay, it's going to be, remember, when you refer to the angle, make sure you use this shape. And you denote it using that shape. So which angle should we look at? This one here, A and D. But we're not going to call it angle A or angle D. We're going to call it angle BAC. Okay, thank you, Lily. BAC is equal to, and what is that equal to?
EDF.
Good, angle EDF. And you would say the test we use for that now is A. Because that angle is the same. Next one, what else is the same in this triangle? Looking at the little symbols. Okay, so make sure you look at the symbols that they have given to you.
The adjacent side?
Yeah, the adjacent sides, so either of these ones, which one should we work with first?
The red one?
Red side, okay, so red side, I can call this either AB or BA, but I'm going to be tricky and call this BA. Length BA. So if I've called this guy BA, what should I call this side? ED. Yeah, why not DE? Okay, make sure you follow the way that you've actually named it. I'm naming this from top to bottom. So from that side to the angle, make sure you call it from that side to the angle as well. So that means it's going to be ED. And that is side. Okay, and then the last one obviously is going to be this one, the green side. So I'm going to be tricky again. I'll call that length CA this time.
I don't like that.
So if I've called it CA, I have to call it FD on this triangle. Sorry, what was that? It is.
That's like my OCD does not actually do it.
But just make sure when you've named it one way, that you call it the same way, or you use the same sort of format in the other triangle. Okay, that's the main thing. So as an answer, you would write triangle ABC is congruent with DE. Oh, sorry, don't forget the. And I've seen year 12s and year 11s forget these. Okay, you have to make sure you put in the shape that you're working with. Triangle DEF. Because, again, using the test, we'll use SAS. Okay.
Could you write like, you know you've done A, B, C, D, E, F?
Yep.
Could you write it another way? Or should
You
go
can. You
another
definitely
way?
can. You can call it triangle CBA is congruent with the triangle FED. But again, make sure you name it the same way. Don't go CBA and then EFD. Okay. Cool. Alright, I'm going to do one more because they didn't do any other good examples here. I'm hoping there's space in there somewhere for you guys to do this. I'm just going to insert my own triangle and I'm going to be tricky with this one. Alright, so copy this triangle down somewhere, guys. Okay, let's see. I will go X, Y, Z. We'll go CRA, B, and C. Okay, I'm going to be a bit tricky with you guys here. Okay, let's go with this length and this length. Okay, this angle, we'll go this angle.
What's the dot that they put in the middle of the energy?
Which one, sorry? This?
Yeah. Like
I've just used, instead of using an angle number, I've just used a dot.
Oh,
Yeah. So instead of using actual numbers, I've just used symbols here. Okay. And I'll put. Let's see. I'll put it right here. Okay. So just be mindful of what's happened here with the shapes. All right. So let's do some congruency tests on this. All right. Just watch out for the naming conventions in the letters. Okay. It's a bit tricky, I know, but this is the sort of questions you'll get in your exams. All right. So let's start. What's the same here? Anyone want to tell me what can we see that's the same?
Side.
Side. Okay. Let's start with the side. Alright, so we're going to go side. I'll call this xy is equal to. Now, what does it correspond with? If you have a look, this side here, AB, good. Why have we called it AB and not BA?
Because you started the x with the angle.
Good, because the x started at this angle here. So we have to call it xy, so this has to be called AB. Side AB. And this is side. Okay, what else is the same?
Angle.
Angles, okay, which angle can I use?
The x.
X angle, okay, so this is going to now be called YXZ. So angle YXZ is equal to angle. Okay, so if I'm looking at this angle, the square angle, that's YXZ, that should be
BAC.
good. BAC, so that's called, yep, and that is angle. Okay, and there's one more thing that's the same, the other angle. Okay, so we can call this one, I might call this ACB this time. Alright, so angle ACB. So if I've called it ACB and I've started from this angle, this should be XZY. Okay, and that's another angle. So we've got our three tests that prove they're the same. SAA, so that means we will now go. In terms of naming it, I might just call this XYZ so people's SEDs are not affected. Okay, so triangle XYZ is congruent with, and this one will work as ABC as well. Okay, so ABC. So triangle XYZ congruent with ABC because?
AAS.
Good. Because the test AAS, or I'll call it ASA, which is the formal way of calling it.
This is AAA.
Ah, is it ASA or AAS?
AAS.
It's not really, I've seen it written many different ways, but that's how I've normally written it, but
Does it matter which order?
not necessarily. I don't
That
think.
one's SAS.
Yes, SAS, because they don't want it to be ASS. That's why. Cool. All right. Any questions with that, guys?